Now let's look at a few other papers that were spawned by the China study data. And I wanted to put this up because a lot of the criticism I receive is that I'm an English major and therefore I don't know how to read scientific papers and I'm probably just making stuff up. And again, maybe I don't even exist, so how could I write a critique? Actually about a year after I wrote my first critique, I put out a second post that I don't think as many people read, but I compiled everything I could find about the China study data that had been written by actual researchers. And I was thinking, well, okay, is this stuff that actually supports what Campbell wrote about in his book? So this is some of the stuff I found. This was pretty awesome. Within China, neither plasma total cholesterol nor LDL cholesterol was associated with cardiovascular disease. So here we have, this is a paper by Campbell himself, where he's saying that cholesterol was not associated with heart disease in the China study data, which is a blatant contradiction of what we read in the book. The results indicate that geographical differences in cardiovascular disease mortality within China are caused primarily by factors other than dietary or plasma cholesterol. Maybe wheat has something to do with that. I don't know. I don't want to make assumptions, but I thought that was pretty interesting. And this is another example of how his research has been misinterpreted, usually by himself, I think. And I also want to say, I don't want to pick on Campbell too much, because I really don't like to make science personal, and I'm kind of poking fun of it right now, but in all honesty, if he ever wanted to eat a salad with me, I would totally be happy to talk with him. So I just wanted to get that out there. This is what he wrote, or what was written in a review by him. He wrote that animal protein, including that from dairy products, may leach more calcium from the bones than is ingested. How many people have heard this claim before? It's pretty common among vegans. And he said, so this was talking about a specific paper that was based on the China study data using just a couple counties. So Campbell and other researchers analyzed the role of dietary calcium in bone density by following closely the diets of 800 women from 5 counties that have very different diets in China. Analyses of the data suggest that increased levels of animal-based proteins, including protein from dairy products, almost certainly contribute to a significant loss of bone calcium, while vegetable-based diets clearly protect against bone loss, Campbell reported. Just remember that as we look at this next thing. So I looked up the actual study that he was talking about, that he published. The results strongly indicated that dietary calcium, especially from dairy sources, increased bone mass in middle-aged and elderly women by facilitating optimal peak bone mass earlier in life. Calcium from dairy sources was correlated with bone variables to a higher degree than was calcium from non-dairy sources. So this is almost perfectly opposite of what he reported in the Cornell Chronicle article. And I think it's an ongoing unfortunate thing, because so much of the data in the China study is fascinating, and I think that it could be a great place to start to look for ideas for further experiments that might be able to clarify what's going on with it. But the fact that most people only see the China study book version of the China study means that much of this data, much of the findings are never going to see the light of day. So unless you're actually surfing PubMed and being a nerd and that sort of thing, it's likely that you will never hear about this anywhere. Unfortunate. Here's another good one by Campbell himself. It is the largely vegetarian inland communities who have the greatest all-risk mortalities and morbidities, and who have the lowest LDL cholesterols. It could well be that there is a minimum level of LDL cholesterol below which cell membranes are adversely affected. Now, this contradicts something that's a very popular idea within the plant-based or vegan communities, which is that if your cholesterol is below 150, total cholesterol below 150, you're said to be heart attack proof, which first of all isn't true, but it's also something that is parroted so often that a lot of people believe it is. And I think that the fact that Colin Campbell pointed out this in one of his own articles is really important, because yes, your cholesterol can be too low, and yes, that can cause problems. And it appears that in the China study data, it was the people with the lowest cholesterol that were actually the unhealthiest. So, and this, who knows who Walter Willett or Frank Hu are? Yeah, pretty famous researchers. They wrote in, this is also a peer-reviewed letter to, I forget which journal, but it was called Reply to T.C. Campbell. And they both wrote, a survey of 65 counties in rural China, which is the China study, did not find a clear association between animal product consumption and risk of heart disease or major cancers. So there we have Walter Willett and Frank Hu. If you don't want to listen to me, listen to these guys. These guys are saying the same thing. The China study data did not show an association between these things. Okay, now the other part of the China study that tends to get a lot of attention is Campbell's rat research. And this is something that started, it was inspired when he was working in the Philippines in the 70s. And he caught wind of a study that some Indian researchers were doing where they were feeding rats different levels of the protein casein, which is one of the major milk proteins. And what they were doing in this experiment was they were exposing two groups of rats to high levels of aflatoxin, which is a carcinogen that when your liver detoxifies it, it can become a carcinogenic metabolite, and it can basically cause liver cancer. So what these researchers were finding was that when they exposed these rats to high levels of aflatoxin and then fed one group 5% casein and another group 20% casein, the 5% group was actually staying free from cancer, whereas the 20% casein group was getting cancer. So Campbell started wondering at this point, does animal protein cause cancer? And notice that he leapt from casein, a very specific, isolated, refined protein, to all animal protein in general. So that's kind of a big leap. So according to the China study, anyway, I actually missed a step. Campbell ended up replicating a lot of this research because he was so fascinated by it. So he for many years, he was working with rats, doing the same kind of aflatoxin and casein study experiments, and he was finding pretty much the same thing, that when the rats were fed a very low level of casein, they were staying free from cancer, and the ones that were getting more protein were getting cancer. So we're led to believe that just animal protein in general could turn cancer on and off. Oh, that shouldn't say Campbell, that should say cancer. Could turn cancer on and Freudian slip. Oh, okay. Could turn cancer on and off like a switch. That's just a casein. Okay. Just by varying the amount of casein he fed them. So this is a very kind of disturbing thing to think about. It's like, wow, is the amount of animal protein I eat affecting my risk of getting cancer? And so the takeaway from the book is that yes, it is, and you should be not eating you should be limiting your animal protein intake to very small amounts if you eat it at all. So Campbell declares that the milk protein casein is a potent carcinogen. So here we are talking about an actual food substance, casein, something that is in breast milk that we all consumed as a child, and it's apparently a carcinogen. Scary stuff. So according to Campbell, in other studies that he conducted using plant protein in place of casein, he discovered that when he used gluten and soy protein instead of casein, actually in neither case, even at 20% levels, none of the rats were getting cancer. So from that, he concluded that all animal protein must be contributing to cancer growth and all plant protein must be protecting against it.